Previously on the Starman Omnibus.
Starman was the superhero alter ego of Ted Knight, who began operating in the 1940s. Knight would take on evildoers with his cosmic rod, which channeled stellar radiation, allowing for its user to fly and fire energy blasts. As Ted grew older, he passed the mantle of Starman on to his older son, David. Then one day, David was killed while out on patrol, and his cosmic rod stolen. With nowhere else to go, Ted turned to his estranged younger son, Jack. Jack soon found himself being attacked by a young woman named Nash, who it turns out was the daughter of longtime Starman foe, the Mist, her brother Kyle having killed David. Jack managed to talk Nash into sparing his life and left to confront Kyle. However, the fight ended with Jack inadvertently killing Kyle, which he promised Nash he wouldn't do. This drove Nash insane and the Mist into a dementia state. Nash would eventually break out of prison and replicate her father's experiment, becoming the new Mist. Back with Jack, he took on the mantle of Starman, eschewing the outfit in favor of a leather jacket and flight goggles. Along the way, Jack encountered MacLeod, an alien who also went by the name Starman, but was now working with a traveling oddity sideshow, from which Jack rescued MacLeod. He also encountered longtime DC villain Solomon Grundy, managing to talk the brute down and befriending him in the process. Perhaps most importantly of all, Jack would meet up with the immortal villain called the Shade. The Shade didn't attack, though. Rather, he gave Jack a journal chronicling his adventures through the ages with the likes of Charles Dickens and Oscar Wilde. The Shade also befriended the O'Dare family, a group of police officers who often aided Starman. Meanwhile, Nash managed to lure Jack into a trap and knock him unconscious. Nash then had sex with Jack while he was out, and then let him go upon his waking up, promising to return when the time was right for a more proper battle.
Jack Knight's Adventures of Starman now continue in the Starman Omnibus, Volume 2.
The Shade is in Central City dealing with a man who hired someone to kill his father. The Shade wants info on the hired killer's whereabouts, and when he doesn't get any, he kills everyone except the cook. The Shade does not kill cooks. It's then that the Shade is approached by a powerful demonic being called Neron. Neron makes an offer. Swear allegiance to him, and he'll increase the Shade's powers. It's an empty offer, though, as the Shade is already immortal, he's already wealthy, and he's already one of the most powerful beings on Earth, so Neron is dealing with an empty hand. Back in Opal City, Jack is hooked up with an old girlfriend. It doesn't mean much, though, as she's ready for some stability, and, well, Jack is commitment phobic. She informs Jack that she's taking a job in Midway City and leaves. Jack then goes to visit a fortune-telling friend named Charity. She gazes into the future and sees Jack partaking in the reunification of the Justice Society of America, and afterwards Jack asks Charity out, but she puts him in the friend zone. Meanwhile, the Shade returns to Opal City where he meets up with the O'Dares. He's located the individual he's been looking for and he needs their assistance.
The Shade is looking for a man named Merritt, who is likewise immortal. In fact, the Shade actually encountered Merritt alongside the playwright Oscar Wilde back in Volume 1. This is the storyline with the guy that has the demonically powered poster that can suck souls into it. And this is what inspired Oscar Wilde to write The Picture of Dorian Gray.
The Shade transports the O'Dares to Merritt's location. In the midst of taking on Merritt's goons, the portal opens up, and despite their best efforts, the Shade and Matt O'Dare get sucked in.
Okay, our next 3 stories are actually little one-off adventures, not part of a grander narrative. Our first is an entry into the Shade's journal detailing one of Ted Knight's earliest adventures as Starman.
Starman was called into a robbery at an art exhibition. The attendees were looted after mysterious gas knocked them all out. That is, except for the ones who were drinking brandy. It's then that a criminal called the Mist made his move. 2 people were left dead, though one of them was a goon who the Mist killed after he tried to take advantage of an unconscious woman. Sensing there might be something more to this incident, Starman took time to investigate. He managed to discern that the Mist would strike again and interrupted a bank robbery. Starman took precautions and donned a gas mask. However, Knight was forced to remove the mask and allow the Mist to escape after he took a woman hostage. Starman then checked back into the police station and found out something about the other deceased individual, who was named Victor Ross. Victor had actually been drinking brandy, meaning the gas shouldn't have affected him. Starman takes off after the Mist, who is trying to make a getaway on train. Starman catches the Mist and he tries to leap over a bridge, and he prepares to charge him with Victor Ross's murder until the criminal eventually fesses up. It turns out that Victor Ross was an art manager who was in a rivalry with another manager over a client list. The rival manager poisoned the man's brandy as the Mist attacked.
Our next story is Jack's annual birthday adventure in which, in his dreams, he's reunited with his late brother David.
Dave pretends to be a pirate and tricks Jack into boarding a pirate ship. After the reveal, Jack fills Dave in on his recent occurrences, like with Gundy and Michael Tomas. The two then go on several pirate adventures before Dave gives Jack his birthday gift, a chance to talk with Adele Knight, the boy's mother.
We now go back into the Shade's journal for our next adventure.
The Shade was taking on the Flash team of Jay Garrick and Barry Allen when he suddenly found himself whisked away to Salem, Massachusetts, home of Dr. Fate. The ancient sorcerer was investigating the theft of a group of documents from a church in Prague. The documents detailed the ceremony that allowed Richard Swift to be transformed into the Shade. The Shade agrees to aid Fate in recovering the documents and stopping the cult that stole them from mastering their own darkness. The two locate the group's headquarters and find that they've arrived too late and the darkness has already been summoned. However, the group doesn't seem to have a conduit to master the darkness properly, causing it to begin running roughshod. Dr. Fate and the Shade work together to contain the summoned darkness and move it to another plane of existence. Back in Opal City, Jack is roused out of bed by an intense dream. He visits Ted and mentions that during the confrontation with Nash, she mentioned a missing keepsake of her father's. The item, a Victorian cross the Mist won in World War I, appeared in the dream alongside Ted's old JSA partner, Wesley Dodds.
Wesley Dodds was a detective hero in the 1940s who fought crime under the guise of the Sandman, and No, not that Sandman. This is a different one. He wore a suit with fedora along with a gas mask because he would subdue criminals with a gas gun that contained, well, knockout gas. Now, if this design looks familiar, that might be because the Golden Age Sandman was actually one of the templates used in the design of the Disney hero Darkwing Duck.
Ted points out that Wesley was actually the first to face the Mist and is probably in possession of the Victorian Cross. So Jack boards a plane to New York City where he is awestruck, partially due to the fact that he's always admired Wesley Dodds, but also because he's a fan of Dodds' wife, Diane Belmont, an author. Wesley and Diane live in a retirement center, but are in good spirits. Jack starts to ask Wesley about the Mist, only to be interrupted by the shriek of a nurse finding a dead body in the apartment next door. Jack sees a masked man running from the room and takes off. Jack chases the man up to the roof, leading to a fight between the two. Wanting to get information, Jack tries not to kill the man, but it just leads to Jack himself almost getting killed. Wesley dons his gas mask and arrives to help, but the killer manages to get away. Wesley begins to look up info on the murder victim. His name was John Blaine, and he built an airship manufacturing empire alongside a man named Warren Gale. Blaine was going through a nasty divorce. His wife, Helen, was arrested already for the murder. Jack departs to scope out a man named Jason Turner, who was having an affair with Helen Blaine, while Wesley takes a trip to Albany to talk with Warren Gale, and Diane investigates Helen with her lawyer. Jack spies on Jason Turner until the lover boy is shot by another masked man. The killer gets away, leaving Jack no other choice but to just slip into Turner's apartment and rifle through his computer before the police arrive. Meanwhile, Warren Gale is distraught as he and Blaine were about to launch a new model airship to their investors. He seems to blame Helen for everything that's happened, but he also lets slip that there might be industrial espionage involved. As this is happening, Helen talks with Diane. The ex-wife points out that Jason couldn't have been involved, as he's too stupid to be doing anything that was involving money. Helen points the finger at Warren Gale, who stood to benefit more from John Blaine's death. The trio of amateur sleuths meet back up, where Jack reveals that someone hired Jason Turner to break the Blaines up and then use Helen's access to the finances to divert funds away. However, the dope made a power play for more money, so the people who hired him then killed him. Suspecting that Gale is behind everything, Jack heads over to the airship compound, and Wesley points out that Gale also specializes in chemical warfare and lends Jack his Sandman mask. Jack begins to investigate, only to get blasted with a stun gun and taken hostage. When Jack doesn't return to New York City, Wesley makes an arrangement with Gale to witness the airship's test flight the next day. As he leaves for Albany, Wesley flashes back to a similar adventure he had with Ted Knight. Wesley had come to Ted's aid after the latter was taken hostage by a villain known as the Gambler. Wesley arrives just an hour before the flight test, and he quietly slips away, putting on his Sandman mask. Sandman then lays low and overhears Gale discussing a plan to bring the airship down on the onlookers' heads. Wesley then manages to locate Jack. Jack spots Wesley and distracts the guards long enough for Wesley to take them down. The two then find a bound and gagged Warren Gale. Realizing that the Warren they've been dealing with is an imposter, Jack and Wesley make their way outside just as the airship takes off. Using the cosmic rod, Jack takes off in pursuit. He makes his way onto the airship, where he gets shot by the pilot and sees the crew tied up. Jack then tussles with the pilot and eventually rips off the mask, revealing a horribly disfigured man. As this is happening, the airship is turned towards the flight control tower. Jack jumps off just as the airship crashes into the tower and explodes, with the villain still on board. Afterwards, Wesley explains that one of Gale's investors had an insured investment and would have made a killing from the accident. The investor hired the imposter and the killers to set everything up. Wesley and Jack then begin looking for the Mist's Victorian Cross.
Okay, now the first part of the next issue is actually a tie-in to a DC Comics event called DC 1 Million. which looked into the future of the DC Universe, namely the 853rd century, when theoretically all the comics will be reaching the issue of 1 million. If only they knew.
It's story time as the Shade sits down with a group of children who are apparently descendants of the Knights, the O'Dares, MacLeod Thomas, and Solomon Grundy. He regales the group with the story of a cosmic prince named Gavin, who would also become Starman. Gavin was a stuck-up selfish brat who wound up getting passed over for the throne by his own sister. His sister then cast Gavin out into space, where he was found by an alien mage named Mentor. Mentor saw something in Gavin and trained the deposed prince to channel the energy of the stars. Gavin became a hero, coming to the aid of the millions who lived in his family's empire. When his sister was killed by an invasion, Gavin avenged her death and became his planet's new ruler. He would marry the love of his life, Myrniel, and ruled as a benevolent leader. That is, until one day when it was reported that his planet was in the path of a matter-consuming entity known as Solaris. Despite Myrniel's pleas, Gavin donned the Starman suit once more and took off to fight Solaris. He fought as long as he could, but Solaris eventually consumed Gavin, and then Solaris vanished. It was believed that Gavin had somehow destroyed the entity, but in reality he just sent it back to its own dimension, and one day Solaris would return.
Solaris' return was the central conceit of DC 1 million.
The story leaves the children feeling a little down, so the Shade tells another story, the first time Starman teamed up with Officer Billy O'Dare, the progenitor of the O'Dare clan. The two would square off with the Prairie Witch, a gang leader who flew off on a broom after committing a series of robberies. They worked together to bring the witch down, and when Starman noticed the broom, it was an ordinary broom. The two men then heard the witch cackling as she was hauled off to jail. Storytime comes to the end as the children want more, but the Shade promises more for a later time.
Since they play a rather prominent role over the next few issues, I think it's time we looked at the O'Dare clan in a little bit more depth. Now, we've already mentioned Billy, the patriarch of the family, who, unfortunately, after a few too many adventures with the Ted Knight Starman, slipped into the bottle and, well, never really got out, died at an early age. Now, Billy and his wife Faith had 4 offspring, all of whom became police officers. The eldest is Clarence, who is the liaison between the commissioner's office and the new Starman. After that, we have Matt, the black sheep of the family, who was kind of a dirty cop, and he's the one who got sucked into the poster alongside the Shade. After that, we have Barry, of whom we don't really know much until later issues. Then we have Hope, the only daughter of the clan, who's fiercely open about her family's Irish roots. And last but not least, there's Mason, who's still a uniformed police officer and the youngest of the group.
Jack pays a visit to the Mist in order to return his Victorian cross. He pretends to be Kyle, the son Jack killed, and tells the Mist that he and Nash are working on carrying on their father's legacy. Afterwards, Jack is approached by Hope O'Dare, who fills him in on the situation with Matt, the Shade, and Merritt. The police are in possession of Merritt's poster and are using it to lure Merritt into a trap and hopefully rescue Matt and the Shade. A complication arises when Jack gets a phone call from Charity, who just had a vision of Merritt killing her. Officer Mason O'Dare is dispatched to keep an eye on Charity. It proves to be easy for him as he's immediately Twitter-pated upon meeting her. Mason takes Charity to a motel for safety as the demon contacts Merritt to give the fortune-teller's whereabouts. However, Merritt's forces get jumped by Mason before they can lay a finger on Charity. This is all meant to be a ruse though, as Merritt is really at the police station trying to reclaim his poster. As he squares off against Starman and the O'Dares, the poster opens back up and Jack leaps in to try to save everyone. Jack finds himself in what appears to be an Old West town populated by reanimated corpses. The only human is the sheriff, Matt O'Dare. Jack rescues Matt from a group of outlaws and the visage melts away, revealing the lieutenant of the Fifth Circle of Hell along with the Shade.
I know what you're thinking, and no, this isn't the devil. Hell in the DC Universe is not reigned over by Lucifer. If you're familiar with a certain television show that was on Fox and is now going to be on Netflix, you're probably aware of the situation.
Jack informs the demon that he is there to rescue the souls the demon absorbed, and he'll fight if needed, but it would probably be fruitless. Instead, the demon calls Jack, Matt, and the Shade for a special offer. The three are transported to different realms. Jack is with his mother, Matt is with an old western hero named Scalp Hunter, and Shade is with Merritt. Obviously, the offer is simple. The souls of the three in exchange for the others. Each of the men is forced to look within themselves to see if they are truly capable of accepting such an offer. All three do so and the game is over. It turns out that hell can't accept the souls of those given up in true selflessness.
Okay, so this isn't the same as, like, say, giving up your soul for a family member or a close comrade. That would still be considered selfish. The selflessness comes in the fact that they're giving up their souls for people they've never met and probably never will meet.
The collected souls, including Jack, Matt, and the Shade, are allowed to return to Earth. Upon returning, Jack and the Shade realize that some of the souls are going to be a little out of place in 1996. The holidays soon roll around, and the O'Dare family is holding a dinner for their friends. Ted, MacLeod, Charity, who Mason finally introduces to his family, and even the Shade pop up. The only one missing is Jack, and that's because Jack has come across a homeless man who was working as a mall Santa when the custodian accidentally threw out his old clothes. The man, named Pete, doesn't mind losing his clothes, but he lost a locket containing the last known picture of his wife and son. Jack resolves to help Pete track down the locket. It turns out that it was found by another derelict and pawned off. Jack and Pete head to the pawn shop to find it being robbed. They save the pawnbroker, including when he has a heart attack, and are given the locket out of gratitude. Jack then brings Pete home for dinner.
Okay, our next story centers on MacLeod Thomas, the blue-skinned alien starman from the 70s who was patterned after the David Bowie song. Now, we're going to get more into his backstory as the story progresses, but up until this point in this volume, his personality has slowly been returning. He's regained his speech. He's not like the mute that Jack rescued from the circus sideshow back in the previous volume. I haven't touched much on this because, unfortunately, this really doesn't bear much onto the plot of the main adventures of these stories.
MacLeod is in the men's room of a discotheque snorting cocaine, which naturally means it's the 1970s. He proceeds to dance the night away and flirt with several people. That is until he's approached by another blue-skinned individual. The man is called Comac, and he is the only other survivor of the planet Talak 8. The planet was invaded by the planet Daxam, while Michael and Comac were dispatched to Earth, or Meridian as their planet calls it, to increase the Talak Empire. However, something caused both to lose their memories, and Comac has slowly been piecing together things, except now he's been infected with something that is killing him. Comac has asked Michael to grant him a warrior's death, which would be achieved in a spirit battle via a magic drug. Michael grants the request and swallows the capsule. The two begin fighting unseen amongst the dancers. Eventually, Michael gets the upper hand and breaks Comac's neck. The Shade takes over narration as Michael leaves the club and immediately is jumped and knocked out with a drug. This would be the last time anyone saw MacLeod Thomas until 1988 when he popped up in the sideshow. Back in Opal City, Jack receives a letter from Nash. The next meeting between the two will have to wait since she's just given birth to Jack's son.
Yeah, that's why Nash had non-consensual sex with Jack's unconscious body back in the first volume.
The boy's name is Kyle Theo, and Nash intends to raise him without Jack. That way, the boy will grow up resenting his father, leaving Jack with the knowledge that his son never loved him. Elsewhere, career criminal Jake Bobo Benetti is let go from prison. Benetti is having a hard time adjusting to life on the outside, so he resolves to rob a bank so he can go back to prison. However, the bank he attempts to rob is already being held up by a group called the Royal Flush Gang. Starman arrives to break up the robbery, and Benetti winds up helping him in taking down the gang. Benetti then winds up being hired by the bank as a security consultant.
And so concludes the Starman Omnibus, Volume 2. How was it? Well, on the plus side, I think the artwork is really well done. Even though they had to juggle multiple artists in different styles, it doesn't seem to break up the storytelling very much. And there's some really nice characterization throughout all of this. In particular, obviously, Jack, the Shade, Wesley Dodds, and the O'Dare family, who finally get to play a prominent role, unlike in the first volume, where they just felt sort of superfluous. And you know what? The multi-part stories involving Merritt or Jack being with the Golden Age Sandman, they play out pretty well too. That's really well done. I like that. Unfortunately, this is where the mixed bag really comes in. The narrative itself just is so disjointed. We're constantly jumping between Jack into Shade Journal entries to the DC 1 Million crossover, and it just feels like you're kind of getting jerked around through the narrative. It's all broken up. The first volume had a nice flow to it. It felt like you were telling a great big story. This one, not so much. Also, the DC 1 Million crossover just feels kind of tacked on. I mean, I know it alludes to some future stories, but unfortunately it doesn't really do much more than that. And like I said, the stories themselves are just kind of eh. And, you know, where was Solomon Grundy in this? Like, they make a brief mention of him maybe being in a coma or something, but, you know, maybe that would have helped MacLeod Thomas, you know, his characterization a little bit more, because like I said, he doesn't add much to the narrative at all. So, yeah, I can't really say I recommend this to anyone unless you're, you know, the only reason I would recommend this to anyone is because this is technically part of the grand narrative that is the mid-90s Starman series. So, yeah, unfortunately, I have to give the Starman Omnibus Volume 2 a C. And with that, let's see what we're doing next time on the Random Trade Review.
Remember, you can help support my work at patreon.com/sleepytimeforcatproductions, where you can request a trade be placed in the randomizer, aka the cardboard box.